This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's show. I got to tell you, every week I tell you I have a special show because I get so excited, but this is extra special. We have our first comedy team. Now, that's not really true because we had Willie, Tyler, and Lester a few weeks back, but this was definitely one of the funniest comedy teams ever to appear at my clubs and are famous around the world for being as strong as they are. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us today on the podcast, it's Mack and Jamie.
Hey, hi, everybody. Hello.
Hi.
Hey, it's so great to have you, and so the podcast audience knows who. Mack, say hi.
Hello, I would be the southern half of the team, so you can probably pick that up. Yeah.
And Jamie.
Yes, and I'm the one with the blue sweater.
Okay.
Perfect. If they can't tell you apart now, it's on them, right?
I know, exactly.
Hey, this is such a treat. As I was explaining to you right before we started this, not only for Jill and I as owners of the club and all the owners, but and I talk to them all the time, we've always felt that Mack and Jamie as a comedy team was not only always an audience pleaser, always entertaining, but two of the nicest guys we could have worked with off the stage. And I just want to say right off the bat, thanks so much for everything you brought to Laughs Unlimited in our history. We really appreciate it.
Oh, man.
That
Thank
goes
you,
back,
Scott,
right,
and thank you, Jill.
Yeah,
that goes back to them. I mean, we never felt more comfortable being at a comedy club anywhere in the country. Always look forward. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's nice to say because you guys have worked everywhere, right?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Pretty much. We'll work anywhere, but we have worked everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's.
In fact, I was just going to say that one of the things that endeared me to you and the club immediately, Scott, was the first night we stayed in the condo, and there was a note up there saying that the employees of the club were like family members, so please treat them as such, which, of course, was a diplomatic way of saying to the comics, keep your horny damn hands off the waitresses.
It was famous rule number 8.
Yeah, and I tell you, that really resonated with me. I thought that was a very human touch, and it made a lot of sense. And
yeah, however, if you do remember, Mack, we did fondle Scott. Right.
Yeah, well, of course. I think
the rule.
Did.
Yeah, well, we're management. We get around the rules like everybody, right? It's so funny.
Sure,
it's so funny you mentioned that. Rule number 8's been brought up in a couple of the earlier podcasts, and it was a list of 10 rules. Not really rules, but an idea of what's going on with the club for people that were coming to the room. And rule number 8 was don't mess around with the staff. I did find out after I sold the club that rule number 8 was broken several times, but we made an effort to protect them.
Well,
and didn't Jill work at the club?
Oh yeah, she started off as a food girl when she was like 20 years old.
Look at you. I guess the co-mingling amongst staff was okay.
That's so funny.
Quite a role model.
Yeah,
I see. So you really are the prime.
So we should talk about comedy.
Violator of rule number 8.
I can see he wants to change the subject immediately.
Oh, that's so funny. It's if you get a chance, listen. Everybody listening in the podcast world, go back. One of the podcasts is called "It Was Her Idea," and it's an interview with my bride Jill, and she proudly states in that how she slept her way to the top, and of course it's a joke because she started off as an employee.
She slept her way to the bottom.
Well, she was a longtime employee, but the friendship developed into more over many years. I mean, we dated for over 15 years before anything got more serious. So,
holy moly!
And we've been married 22 years, so it's been quite a trip. So let's bring this to a beginning for comedy. Now, it is unusual to be a comedy team. It's so much harder. You have two guys, you're splitting the pay, you have more to deal with in travel, you have more to deal with in housing, but you do have the energy to work off each other. Let's bring the podcast listeners back to the beginning. I don't know what year it was. I know that Mack was working in a paper mill, I believe, and Jamie was a radio DJ. Does that sound right?
Well, that's pretty close.
Pretty close. It's a great story about
It is a great story.
we got
And,
together, actually.
we kind of got together. I tell it very well, Scott.
Well, I actually
We were in Fort Lauderdale. We met in Fort Lauderdale.
in Miami,
Actually in Miami, right next to Fort Lauderdale, very close.
Right.
And we went up to Georgia to visit my uncle Fernando.
No, Matt, we went to Orlando to visit my Aunt Georgia.
I'll never forget.
Right.
It was great.
Okay.
Remember it like it was yesterday. She lives in this beautiful, huge, kind of not a mansion exactly, but what would you call that, Dave?
A trailer. It was a
It
trailer.
was huge, but it was a giant trailer, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a double wide. Yeah, I'll give you that.
Double wide. See? I'll never forget. She had this pet. We had to leave early. Jamie didn't get along with this animal. It was a Doberman, and
it was a Siamese. I'm allergic to
right. It's a Siamese Doberman.
Siamese.
Ugliest thing I've ever. I have nightmares. I can't believe that's amazing. I can't believe I remembered all that. But
I can't either, Matt. You brought it all back. You brought it all back.
So thank you for triggering that one.
Yeah,
Scott.
boy, we haven't done that in years. Hey, if you want the true story, actually, Mack was living in Key West. He was a cartoonist in Key West and a writer. I think he contributed to the paper and some magazines around town. And everybody owned the Mack Dryden cartoon calendar. Key West cartoon calendar, drawn by Mack Dryden with all these clever little things on it. And everybody had one in their kitchen. I thought the guy was probably about 50, 60 years old because there was so much wisdom and comedy coming out of these calendars. And I didn't know him. And I was the DJ, the morning DJ on the AM radio station that broadcast to Key West, which is an island about 3 miles by 1 mile. I got a note when I got off the air one day. It said, "You must be one of the funniest men in Key West. I'm the other one."
Oh, really?
Mack Dryden.
Oh,
Mack
wow.
Dryden. And he said, "Come on up if you're interested." So he had his address there, no phone number, just an address. So when I got off the air that day, I drove around to his apartment, and he was sitting out on the porch on my bicycle. Yeah, I rode my bicycle.
Everybody rode bikes in Key West.
Yeah. No mopeds in those days. It was all bikes. So I got my conch cruiser and I cruised up to his place, and we sat there and had a beer and talked about what our ambitions were, and they seemed to mesh. And so we started doing stand-up together. And in the first one back, if I'm not mistaken, was actually at the Casa Marina Hotel when I produced those Sunday night shows.
Yeah, that was it. And you asked me to do it with you. Let me back up just a little bit. And Scott, just so you'll know, I was a paper mill worker in Mississippi where I grew up.
Oh, okay.
So you had that right. But then I was a newspaper reporter for a little while in Mississippi, and then I moved down to Key West because I saw an AP story about how cool it was. But Jamie, working on the station there, being morning DJ, it was the station, and everybody in Key West listened to it. Everybody knew him, and a lot of people in Havana knew him, as a matter of fact.
Popular with the Cuban monarchy, huh?
Well, you had a big Cuban audience, didn't you, Jamie? As I was
yeah, they got, especially at night, because it was an AM station, so the skip waves would bounce down to Cuba, and we would get handwritten notes from communist Cuba saying, "Please play R. Havens' Sunshine." So we knew that it was Richie Havens, and the song was Sunshine, and it was a great connection. Radio Free Havana, we called it.
Yeah. And
I bet Castro appreciated that.
Oh man, we rocked it out too. We played some heavy rock and roll, and in those days you could play anything you wanted to on the air. It was AOL, album oriented rock.
Oh,
All you
wow.
had to do is put
That's
the track off.
great station
Yeah.
to get in tied with.
And
Radio
let
was
me
so
tell
much
you,
fun.
It was so much fun. And Bobby Keller, who's on the Eagle there in Sacramento, was my boss. Yeah.
No way.
He's the top DJ in California, Bobby Keller.
Bobby was
on the Eagle.
So important to the beginning because he used to be with KZAP Radio. And
that's right.
He was the one that we would go in with comics like you guys, Bruce Baum, Seinfeld, and some of these early guys sang it. We would go in. And what was great about radio in those days is it was so loose. We could just show up at the studio, hang out for an hour or so, get a lot of plugs in. The comics would get some material in, and boom, we go on. It really helped put Laughs Unlimited on the map. And Bob Keller, we will owe him forever. Great guy. But I didn't know you worked for him. That's amazing.
He was the program director at the station. Bobby Keller. I can still do Bobby Keller.
Well, he must have been young too.
At the hooky now.
Wasn't he?
We were both in our 30s.
Jamie, wasn't he Disco Bob back then?
No, we were in our 20s. He was in his early 30s. I was in my late 20s. And he was called Frisco Bob. Frisco Bob.
Wow. I had no clue.
Frisco Bobby on the island. Everybody on the island would listen to him at night. Frisco Bobby.
Well,
and
nobody knew music like him, and having a hard rock station to work on, that must have been fun for you, Jamie, and having the
he was brilliant. He was brilliant, and that's how I met Mack, and we started working together in Key West. The comic strip from New York had opened a annex club in Fort Lauderdale, and they would bring down 4 comedians from New York every week to Fort Lauderdale and have them perform in that club. And we got wind of it through a gal who used to live in Key West, but went up there and she was a waitress at the club. And she called us and said, "Hey, you guys are as funny as any of these guys, and you should come up and work out at this club." We were so freaked out to be able. We worked with Paul Reiser, we worked with Dennis Wolfberg, with Sinbad, with Jerry Seinfeld, with
Eddie Murphy,
Carol Leifer, Eddie Murphy. All these people would come down to the Fort Lauderdale club 4 at a time, and we would drive up every week. It was a 5-hour drive, and we drive up for the weekend shows, and we got so that we were regulars there, and so we got to know these people. And Rick Overton and all these great comics would tell us, "Hey, you guys should go to New York." So.
Did you get to showcase? Were you actually performing, or were you just a student of the art form then?
No, we would go up. Listen to this. It was a 5-hour drive from Key West to Fort Lauderdale. It's not like it was right next door.
Right.
And we would get in that car of my 1970 Plymouth Satellite. Ollie, we called it, because it was
because my 1950s Lincoln Cosmopolitan had a broken starter.
Classics, all classics.
So we remember we tied the muffler to the chassis with coat hangers, and headed up. One time we headed up there when the Muriel boat lift, the Cuban flood of people were coming up the Keys. Remember that?
Yeah,
that's right. Yep. And Castro emptied the prisons.
Yeah. We were also headed up there what I was going to say is we would go up there and we could only do 10 minutes because that's basically all we had at the time.
So, 5-hour drive for a 10-minute set. That sounds like the beginnings of a comedy life.
And we would sleep when sometimes they'd have too many comics at the condo and we couldn't sleep at the condo, and we would sleep in the club. And we would be awoken the next morning by the cleaning crew,
Jeez. That's such an interesting way to be introduced to the industry and to that type of career choice, but exactly the type of experience where you're either going to, make it and be a professional, or you're not going to put yourself through that. That was your crucible in deciding what your future was going to be. And obviously you passed it and started performing. And Mack, you were saying you had about 10 minutes of material. When did it become more of a set that where you were getting paid gigs.
Okay, Jamie and I are both laughing because we got the story here. That's terrifying.
It's so funny you should ask that. This is terrifying, is right.
So we were at the Comedy Store, and we had a by this time we kept building every week, trying to add this and that. Yeah, and we had about 25 solid minutes, and we could improvise for another 5 to have half an hour. And so this guy approached us, and he said, "I got a club up in the Tampa area." It was Pinellas Park, and his club had the very classy name of Mother Tucker's. And he asked us if we could come up and do what was it, Jamie? 2 weekends? I've forgotten. Anyway,
one weekend. No, he offered us $1,000.
Oh yeah,
to come up there, perform, because his idea was that he could have comedy in his club. We were the first comedians to ever perform at this club. And dig this, this was 1980. Okay, so this club, there was a bar, and in the middle of the bar was a swimming pool.
Oh, wow.
And backgammon tables, because backgammon and cocaine was huge.
Oh,
I can't remember whether Quaaludes or cocaine was bigger in those days, but somehow it involved backgammon. and
so we get up there. He says 2 shows a night.
Yeah,
and I said great. And we got up there, and I said, how does the audience in the first show differ from the audience in the second show? Are they rowdier or quieter or what? And he said, oh no, same audience. Just 2 shows.
It was like vaudeville all over again, where just thrown up.
30 minutes. Scott, we had 30 minutes of material, and he wanted us to do an hour every night. We were pulling jokes from the 8th grade.
Yeah, yeah. We got. I'll tell you what happened exactly. Is Mack set up a command center in the kitchen with his typewriter, and I took the car and drove it to the grocery store and bought supplies. And for the next 5 hours, we wrote a half an hour.
Wow. And you didn't have a choice. I mean,
we didn't have a choice.
You were working under fire.
And we had 2 shows that night.
How did it go over? I mean, were you happy with it, or were you just so scared you just plugged through it?
Well, let's just say that we got asked back for 3 more weekends.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
So we stayed up there for 3 weeks, 2 more weekends, because we were there for 3 weeks, and we had enough money in our pocket. We looked at Key West to our left. We looked at New York to our right and said, let's go to New York.
Good choice.
Yeah. What
a great way to get started. Not only $1,000 a week, which is great payback in 1980, but you were forced under the circumstance to create and write and really hone your act in probably a very difficult situation, because for the podcast audience, we want to make sure you understand comedy really started its boom. In fact, I opened in 1980. That it was just transitioning out of the strip clubs and out of the jazz clubs into a mainstream entertainment format. So just like this bar where there was no shows, there was no format, there was probably not decent sound, lighting, and staging. It was really the crux of the business just developing, and everybody was winging it.
Yeah. Well, we were certainly winging it because we had to come up with an hour show.
I think that's a great story.
25 minutes.
That's great.
Let me just a little non sequitur here. But when I was doing stand up by myself in Key West,
he was the best stand up in Key West, being the only stand up in Key West. So naturally, I gravitated toward him.
Well, I think
a fellow named Paul Lind became a fan. And he would come to the Pier House where I was performing every weekend with his rowdy group of boys. So I got to know some of his friends. And Jim McClellan, who was just a great guy, told me the story about 1958. Paul Lynde was in Columbus, Ohio at Kenley Players doing pillow talk with some actors. I forget who it was. He told his friend Jim that he had always wanted to do stand-up and to find him a club. And so Jim went out and found a strip club that would let Paul Lynde get up and perform stand-up.
In between the acts.
And that night, this is a true story. So he got introduced after, these strippers are taking it all off. And he gets introduced after these strippers, and he walks up on stage. He says, "Wow, it smells like pussy in here."
Well, he got the audience's attention, didn't he?
And he followed it with, "I think." So let me do the joke again, since you interrupted me with your laughter. He says, "Wow, it smells like pussy in here, I think."
Well, and you do a pretty good Paul Lynde.
Oh, I do a killer Paul Lynde.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because Paul became a friend of mine. He was a customer of mine when I was a jeweler in Key West. Well, a silversmith. I was a silversmith, and he bought a belt buckle from me once. I call it the quick release. There was a piece of turquoise in the middle of the belt buckle, and if you push the belt buckle released. And he came into my store one day, and he said, "Oh, I love that buckle." I said, "I call it my quick release." He said, "Oh, how much?" Sold it to him for $350.
Woo.
And then it got to be every time that he got a new boyfriend, he'd come in the store and he'd say, "Jamie, need another buckle?" And I go, "Quick release?" He said, "Oh, you betcha."
Well, that's funny. And what a great guy to meet in the beginning. Now, how much success did you have in New York? Were you in New York long?
We were there for a year, and we were
there for a year. Yeah. Wow.
We were just killing them in the showcase clubs, Comic Strip, Catch a Rising Star, and the Improv.
I don't think they weren't paying in those days, though, were they?
No, nothing.
No.
Yeah, that had to be tough.
It was just working. We were just working, man. Belzer was at Catch. He was the MC. Bill Maher was an MC at Catch. Bill was the first MC to put us up at Catch because that's what you had to do. You kind of had to know somebody to get on stage at Catch.
Oh, that worked out in LA too, at the store and the Improv. If you got to know somebody, or they over a period of time is a regular,
right?
They could throw you up. Hey, I got 5 minutes. Go for it.
Right. Well, we were. Go ahead, Mack.
We were kind of seasoned pros by the time we even got to LA, but New York, it was kind of raw. And you remember I'll tell you two quick Catch a Rising Story anecdotes. Bill Maher finally said, "These guys are great. You should put them on." And they said, "Okay." So he told us, he said, 8 minutes, guys. That's it. 8 minutes. So we planned out our set to 8 minutes. We went in there. We just tore the house down, and we got off at 8 minutes. Well, Bill was outside on the sidewalk having a cigarette.
Forgot his own rule.
Well, no, he came flying in, and he said, "Hey, what did you do? You did 8 minutes. Nobody just does what I told them to do. They're always going over 5 minutes." And we're rookies, Bill. We just do what you tell us to do.
You say do 8, we do 8.
Oh, well, that's a funny story.
The other anecdote was, as you remember, Scott, we would end our set. I would sing Desperado, and Jamie would do horrible things to his face with
tape face, right
behind me. Yeah. And it was a killer bit that we couldn't follow, so it was our closing bit. And when we came in one night, somebody said, "By the way, guys," and this was during football season, somebody says, "There's some Eagles in the audience there tonight." And I thought football immediately.
Right.
Philadelphia Eagles. Why do I care? Football guys in there. So I sang Desperado, and Jamie takes his face.
No, it was the Eagles.
Yeah, it was the Eagles. Glenn Fry,
yeah.
Came up to us in the lobby afterwards. "Hey, I'm Glenn Fry. said, I just want you to know. I mean, he looked kind of threatening when he came up to me. He said, I want
Well,
you to know.
when he walked up to us, he said, "You sons of bitches."
Yeah.
Those were the first words out of his mouth.
That's a little threatening.
You sons
Yeah.
of bitches.
He said,
That's the prettiest song I ever wrote, and I'll never be able to sing it again without thinking of you.
Yeah.
Well, that's a compliment, really.
He was pretty loaded.
He was pretty loaded, and we told him we had a car, and so he suggested that we go out and ride around in the car, and of course he had some produce with him, so it was a wild night on the town.
Wow, with Glenn Fry. Well, you couldn't have picked a better audience member to see that bit. And for him to say that is really a compliment, but I bet he really did kind of freak out a little, because even though you're doing his song, it's what Jamie was doing that really pushes that whole bit over. That's hysterical.
God, people would be crying in the front row over that bit. That was amazing. And let me tell you, I can follow up that story, because I hung out. Mac, you went home that night. I hung out with Glenn that night.
Yeah, I remember.
And we became pretty close. And he had this girlfriend named Dixie, and Dixie joined us. And we went to a party for a little bit, but nothing was really happening there. It wasn't really what he wanted to do. So he said, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Well, I'm in New Jersey." And he said, "Oh, hell, you're not going back there tonight." He said, "Just come on back. I'll get you a room." So he got me a room in the Warwick Hotel during the course of, and then I saw him the next morning for breakfast, and he and Dixie were there. And I said, "Listen, sometime we might want to use that song on TV." I said, "Could we get the rights to it anyway? Who do I contact?" And he said, "Well, here's my card." He gave me his card. He said, "Anytime you guys want to use that song on TV, you just call this number."
Oh, that was smart.
3 years later, I think. 3 years later, we were on a show called Solid Gold. We were the comic relief for the Solid Gold dancers.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "Do you do any music?" And we said, "Yeah, we do Desperado." And they said, "Oh, we can't do that." And I made a call, and the secretary said, "Oh, yeah, Glenn said you might be calling."
Oh, that's cool.
And we got that song for free.
Wow.
And by the way,
that was smart to ask Jamie, by the way.
yeah.
Yes. Well, it came up in the conversation. You know,
I owe you one. But I was the one who played the guitar, and which was such a pain in the ass everywhere we went.
Yeah, traveling with a guitar is hard.
Yeah, and we as you recall, Scott, we also had some props. Well, we had even more props when we first started, and then we made a rule for ourselves: if we can't get it in this briefcase, it ain't going in the show. And so Jamie carried the briefcase, Jamie carried the briefcase, and I carried the guitar. But anyway, when that night at Catch, when Glenn Fry saw us do Desperado, and he accosted us in the lobby in a very funny way. He also said an aside to me. He said, "By the way, I'll be glad to teach you how to play that song if you'd like me."
That's hilarious. Hey, nice job, but if you want to do it right.
Yeah. I mean, oh my God, I was so horrible. I just learned exactly what I needed to learn to do my job on the stage.
Oh no,
I was not a guitarist.
Yeah, that's kind of that was part of what made the bit so good, though. I mean, that's a hilarious story. Well, I'm gonna bring it all back down a little bit and ask you. You were in New York, Florida, New York. You came out to the West Coast. Do you remember how you came to work for me? Did you audition, or was that booked through an agency? I don't recall. I'm losing it a little.
I think it was through Gail Stalker.
Oh yeah, it would have been. Gail and I did a lot of business in those days.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
I think it was Gail Stalker.
And I think when you had a relationship with Gail in such a way, if she said these guys are great, then you took her word for it, and we went up and we knocked her socks off. So.
Oh yeah, you guys always knocked it out of the park. And Gail was one of those agents that after we worked together, we ended up working together for several years. But in the beginning, she never gave me a bad hit. I mean, everybody that she brought up and recommended, did well, and you guys
She
being
was
one
great.
of the
She was
funniest
very
comedy
respected.
teams. Oh yeah, she was amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You're saying that we were the funniest comedy team?
Oh yeah, well,
I didn't want to
actually,
interrupt you. I didn't want to interrupt you when you were saying that.
well, not only, here's what's interesting, because from a producer's point of view, not only were you one of the, if not the funniest comedy team, but when it comes to ranking the acts in general, you guys still come up very high on the list of overall entertainment value, because I don't ever remember a time that you didn't bring it for the audience. And that is something difficult to do night after night, week after week. And in the case of Laughs Unlimited, you worked for me for years at all the different clubs and always did well. And as I mentioned, alluded to in the beginning of the podcast, you were also great off stage, which is such an important part from a producer standpoint when you're working with somebody. If they can bring it on stage and be easy to work with off stage, you're the top of the list.
Oh, thank you, man. Well, I got to tell you, Scott, you also were a superhero to us. As you recall, one night, a couple of Winnebago filled with drunken football fans who had seen a game that day came in the club, and they were seated in the audience while the opening act, which I believe, you might correct me, but didn't you have a clown every once in a while who would just kind of, when people were being seated?
Yeah, we had Clancy the clown would kind of open things up. He would entertain while people are in line, and then he would go up and do about a 8-minute magic set mime. He was a mime clown, and it was kind of
say no more.
It was kind of poking fun at, everybody hates clowns, and when you're an adult, it's not nearly as fun. But see, we were working that to our benefit and saying, we're in charge. You're going to see a clown. And in Clancy's case, he was very entertaining and did magic. Yeah, he had gone up and things went badly quickly.
Oh man, these guys were they were horrors. They were yelling things and making his life miserable. And we went to you and said, this is not working out. And Jamie, remember, Scott came down and said, I'll take care of it. And I was thinking, there's no way. These guys are just animals. Mm-hmm. And he kept assuring us that it would be okay, that they would not be doing that when we went on stage. And sure enough, just before it was getting down to, fish or cut bait time, the police, the Sacramento Police Department showed up. And I think you must have had a cozy relationship with them, Scott. I
worked very closely, and as a business owner, I always felt it was important to take care of the men in blue. And we had a good relationship with the cops. What was nice about Laughs Unlimited, because even though we were a bar, people were in and out in a couple hours. Generally, people didn't get too drunk at our place. They might drink before or after, but our place was always fairly problem-free. And in this particular situation, and I remember it like it was last week because it was a scary moment for me, there was about 18, 20 drunk guys, and they had come in motorhomes. So when I noticed, and what you noticed, that this wasn't going to work for a 2-hour show, I delayed the start of the show, called the police, told them the circumstance, and I don't know how much you guys saw, but it was so rare for me to call. They took it very seriously, and there was no less than 12 officers showed up.
I know, it was
they lined
blue. It was great.
They lined up about every 10 feet going from our entrance all the way out into the alley. And then one of them came with me into the club, and I introduced myself to this rowdy group and said, look, we're happy to give you your money back. This is obviously not the type of entertainment you're looking for. It's not going to work for the entertainers, for the rest of the audience. And to be honest, guys, it's not going to work for you. And there was some grumbling and some crap, but I had the officer standing right next to me. What was so interesting, or really proud for me to see, was that as these guys got up, one by one, two by two, and marched out, the police were all lined up. And when they came through my door and they saw 12 officers waiting, making a path for them to leave, they got obedient really quick. They sobered up really quick. And I don't know if you know the rest of the story. So we marched them out. We gave them back their money, and we went ahead and started the show. The police marched them out about a half a block away from the club and let them
Shot
go,
them.
right?
Oh.
But they knew what the situation was, and they waited for them to get into their vehicle, and they drove less than a block, and they got pulled over and cited for DUI.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Right.
they made sure that that was not a situation that was going to happen in Old Sacramento again, and it was
That's great.
it was one of those weird experiences. I mean, over 21 years of owning nightclubs, we've had a few interesting moments, but that is one that will always stand out, mostly because it was such a large group, way more than one person. I was always I was the MC, the club owner, and the bouncer. So.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
It was more for me. So thanks for remembering that. And I didn't know that you were the act that night, but that was definitely a moment. And thanks for sharing that. And it worked out because we had a delay in the show, but then the audience, it was so funny is when they walked out, the audience cheered.
Oh,
they were so happy to see him leave.
Well, not only did the audience, the rest of the audience, the well-behaved audience cheer, but there were women in their group who were really just furious at these jerks who were yelling and got them all thrown out. And they were yelling at the jerks that got them thrown out too. People in their own party. Everybody
ganged up. Well, we've brought you to Laughs Unlimited, and we've mentioned that you worked for me for several years at all the different clubs. We always enjoyed having you. Is there any memories from working Laughs other than that? Positive memories. Maybe, of course, that was positive in the end. That you guys have.
Well, they were all
very
positive. I remember playing softball with you guys. That was really fun.
Yeah. Jamie, you remember the night at Nights Unlimited where an autograph fan came back? And
yeah. I'll never forget that.
That was special.
Yeah, she asked to come back and meet us. She was a cancer survivor, and I think that's how she got in to see us. And when she walked in, she opened her shirt and said, "Would you sign these for me, please?" And they were two beautifully formed, scarless, nippleless breasts.
And we signed them. Mack on the left,
Jamie on the right.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who signed the ampersand in the middle.
No,
was that you?
We might have asked Scott to have that honor, but I
and she said, "I have been through chemo and radiation, and I've been through a double mastectomy, and I'm having my breasts reconstructed. And I've just been through hell in the last few years. And I wanted to tell you how much this show meant to me and how I laughed heartily for the first time." And so she was, we started talking about it. And I said, what an experience. And I said, I don't think I've ever asked a woman this before, but I must ask you now, where are your nipples? And she said, "Oh, they're here." And she pulled her zipper down, and she opened her pants, and her nipples were sewn to her groin area, right above her pubic hair.
Where they were
growing and living and thriving, and they were soon to be transplanted over the Mack and Jamie autograph. But at least she got to enjoy that autograph for a little while.
That is such a wild story. Not only is it make you feel good about what comedy brings to those suffering from a disease and how comedy can have healing factors, which is so true. But in this case, the unique situation that she was preserving her nipples surgically attached to below her belt line to be replaced later.
Yes.
Autographs Unlimited. It was quite
that had to be the best autograph you guys ever gave.
It was the most interesting one for sure.
Most interesting. Yeah, I of course I signed in cursive.
Well, I got to tell you guys, for our regular podcast listeners, you'll be surprised to hear that's the second time we've heard that story.
Oh, no, really?
The feature act, which I think was Tom McTeague, was sitting in the green room, said he was nothing to do with the situation, but he was sitting there when she opened her pants and showed her nipples, and he will never forget it. He was on the floor, shocked, and thought it was
that was Tom.
And he
That
thought it was
Tom.
the biggest compliment, not only to you guys as entertainers, but he has never forgotten that story and has shared it. And he shared it on the podcast when I interviewed him. Just so you know, it's that important.
That is amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that is amazing.
You know, you talk long enough to guys in comedy, and all the threads kind of come together for some reason like that. It's amazing how that happens.
Yeah. Well, it's a shared experience. You know, a lot of people think that being a stand-up comic is just fun and frivolity. And I've tried to share with the podcast listeners that it is that, but it's also, you have to really love what you're doing. It is an art form, and important to remember, it's business. And so when, like you said, all these entertainers that have gone through the challenges of being professionals have, in what I found through the podcast interviews, they've all taken different paths, but they weren't all that different. It was a series of different experiences, and they all ended up, most of them, the professionals ended up in the same place, but they all went through a lot, like living in your car, working for nothing, you know, trying to travel with a guitar, you name it. But that story about the cancer survivor is something that really is poignant about why we do this, that sharing that gift of comedy and laughter does touch the audience. I, as a club owner and producer, I used to sit back and watch, and I didn't watch the show. I could do the acts by by memory. I knew the acts. I was watching the audience. And and it never failed that when you're watching 200 people laughing their butts off, who's the one person that you notice? The one not laughing. And you'll stare at them until they break, you know, because you want everybody to be sharing the experience. And it always made me feel so good. It was an important part of being a club owner in my mind. Yeah. But you guys brought it on big time. So thank you for that.
Thanks, man.
Well, I have to tell you that even though that particular experience was kind of graphic and memorable for obvious reasons, Jamie can tell you that we had a number of, just dozens, if not hundreds over our career of people come up to us and say things like, I lost my sister to breast cancer last month. I haven't laughed since, and you guys made me feel better than I have in ages. Or we just found out that my husband has, colon cancer, or my daughter is in surgery and blah, blah, but you made us feel better. And you know what? I started realizing that we were not, I used to say in quotes, I'm just a comedian. And I don't say that anymore. We're providing a very needed service out there. People need to laugh. We are healers. We heal.
We may have taken it too far, but I didn't mean to get too deep, but I think that comedy and the art form is important.
Scott, at my age, my next birthday is going to be my 72nd birthday. And at my age, they say that laughter is the best medicine. Well, whoever said laughter is the best medicine has never had a morphine drip. Let me tell you that.
Well, I have not.
Nothing like it.
Tell you what, as a guy that hasn't experienced a morphine drip, I'll take comedy until that point. But that is so true.
Good choice.
So you guys, you work clubs all over the country. You had a fairly normal in the comedy sense beginning, and you were headliners by the time you came to work for me. And I know that later on, and I opened in 1980. You started work for me pretty early on and worked for over a decade with me. And it was amazing. But about 1985, you were on Comedy Break, and later on, you did The Tonight Show. You've done a lot of TV compressed in the 80s and 90s, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we did. We did 125 episodes of Comedy Break. That was our show, Comedy Break with Mack and Jamie.
Yeah.
And
that's what I thought was amazing.
Mack's done some acting. On Comedy Break, we basically discovered Kevin Pollak and Jan Hooks.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a
I
trip.
knew about
That was
Jan. I
fun.
didn't know about Kevin. That's quite a discovery.
Yeah. He was one of our sketch players.
Was it
Kevin did,
difficult?
like-
Go ahead, Mac.
Kevin was just one of the main players for 75 episodes, and
Brilliant.
having all those impressions at our fingertips was, invaluable. He's great. We had a blast.
Hey, everybody in podcast land, if you get a chance, Google Comedy Break. And I've already done that, and it is hilarious. And what you guys brought to TV back when comedy was just starting to really hit its pace was perfect timing. But how lucky for you guys to get your own show that way. Congrats.
Yeah, it was fun. We did 2 seasons of that. Then we started working with Tony Orlando and Eddie Rabbit and William Morris, who was our agent. When you don't have a TV series anymore, they look for other things for you to do, and they were wonderful to us. And then we started working with Diana Ross, and we worked with her pretty regularly for about 6 years.
Wow, that's a long run.
Through her, we discovered the corporate market, and that's where we ended up in corporate America.
Well, you're perfect
doing
for that because you're basically clean acts. Yeah,
we're clean act. We would send out questionnaires to our clients, so we knew the audiences. Jay used to give me a hard time about that. He's like, what are you doing? Just do the same show every time, like I do. What are you doing? You change your show every time? It's crazy. But that's what we did.
Yeah, we would write special material. We would get names and particular, challenges, whatever the organization was going through, and we would write jokes about it, and they would just eat that stuff up when you do stuff.
They love that. A few of the magicians I know that did a lot of corporate, what always would push the show over the top for the employees or the guests of the conference was when you got the leaders or the CEOs involved in a trick. And it's the same with comedy. If you can bring them and bring them into the show, you're going to be a success. Now, it was in those years that we lost you as a regular act because you kind of outgrew us. But the success was huge. Congratulations. What year did you end up doing the Tonight Show?
Oh, we
did the Tonight
skyrocketed. We did it in 1983, about 3 years after we first got together.
Oh, that early. Wow.
Yeah, with Johnny. We did it with Johnny twice.
This is how old we are. We did it with Johnny twice,
Yeah. And then we did it with Jay once in 98.
Yeah, but being on with Johnny had to have been special.
Oh, it really was.
It really was.
We were backstage. Rip Taylor came out, and you remember Rip, right?
Oh, yeah.
No, wait. It was Charles Nelson Riley.
Oh, thank you. You're right. Charles Nelson Riley.
By the way, there's not a huge difference.
You're getting your flamboyant men mixed up.
Okay. And he was throwing confetti in the audience and balloons and all kind of stuff. And we had told everybody we were ever acquainted with that we were going to be on the Tonight Show that night. And so we were just, horrified that we might not make it on because he was going too long. And sure enough, at the last minute, they came back and said, it's time. We were standing backstage, and people say, oh, my God, you must have been nervous. And we were the opposite of nervous. It was like, oh, my God, let us please.
Yeah, you were ready. Curtain. You were trying to get out there.
Come on, that golden curtain. Open it.
And,
oh, wow.
We did. It was 6 minutes. We were killing them doing an hour. We could do 6 minutes in our sleep, so we couldn't wait. And sure enough, we killed them. And
it was great. Man. That's what a great experience, and to be able to have that in your memories is so special. Now, you did a lot of TV. You had your own show. You had all this success in clubs, and you ended up doing corporate, which made you lots of money. So you're a huge success. Let's wrap this up a little bit. Tell me, Mac, I know that you've been doing some motivational speaking. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, well, when it was obvious that Mack and Jamie, we were kind of fading from view and, an Asian comedy team. Who could guess that they would fade from view? But Anyway.
Well, we were in our mid 60s.
Yeah.
No, early 60s actually.
Early 60s. And so I had some stuff that I had done. I spent a little time in an African prison. I had survived 2 bouts with cancer. And happily, Jamie and I were actually at a convention where there was a humorous motivational speaker on the bill. And I went to see him, and I found him to be neither humorous nor motivational. And I thought,
great discovery.
I think I can beat that. And so I put together a speech, and I started doing Kiwanis clubs and Lions clubs and stuff in L.A. and got my chops down and just slowly built it up. And yeah, for the last, 15, 20 years, that's been my main source of income. I do motivational speaking.
Well, ladies and gentlemen in podcast land, he's still out there doing it. If you're looking for a great motivational speaker who's not only has a great story and a great message, but one of the funniest people out there, give Mack Dryden a call. Google him, look him up. But he's your guy. And then Jamie, I know that. Go ahead.
MackDryden.com.
MackDryden.com. There you go, folks. Now, Jamie, in
I'll
your
never
case,
remember that.
MackDryden.com.
I'll never remember that.
We'll never remember MackDryden.com. Never.
Oh my God!
I've almost
Why
got
so complicated?
MackDryden.com already.
And then, Jamie, tell us. I know you've got a book out about your recent experience. And by the way, for those of you that don't know in podcast land, Jamie went through a heart transplant and did basically a live diary of his experiences. And I want you to tell the story, Jamie, but I was one of the followers and just found it fascinating that you could use your humor to get yourself through obviously a challenging situation. Tell the audience what you've got for them.
Well, I've had a change of heart recently.
Literally.
I want to share. Yes, I want to share it with you. I had congestive heart failure. I was born with a weak lower descending artery, and it exploded, and I had a heart attack. And for 12 years, I had a pacemaker. And Mack and I kept working. Everything was fine, and then my heart just started to fail. And they told me I needed a new heart. So I waited for 3 months, which isn't a very long wait, up at Cedars-Sinai. And it's funny that I've worked Caesars and Cedars. And I was very, very fortunate. And I have since become an ambassador for One Legacy. And One Legacy is the organization that puts donors together with recipients in California. So we're working with One Legacy Hollywood, and I hosted an open mic night for some high school kids the other night. But I have been making money doing what I used to do in Key West, and that was being a silversmith. I started doing jewelry again.
Wow.
Yeah, so I have a site called...
But you have a book,
Silver.
too.
Well, I have Silver by Jamie.
Oh, I don't know that one. Okay.
Well, yeah, I kind of went off in a different direction there.
Oh, sorry.
The book was written every day. I would put an entry in the diary, Tin Man Diary, and post it. And I became known as a Tin Man. And people were encouraging me to put all these little stories together and my entries together, and I did. And so I got a book out now, and it's doing quite well. I get great reviews.
Well, I will tell you that the whole thing's fascinating, and for everybody in podcast land, Google Jamie Alcroft and the book Diaries of the Tin Man. Is that what it's?
No, Scott. The Tin Man Diaries.
The Tin Man Diaries. I wanted to make sure we got it right. The Tin Man Diaries.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've exhausted the time we have to. We could talk forever, and I think we'll do separate interviews with each of you and get in a little deeper. But comedically speaking, I want to end this by saying thank you. Comedy teams, especially good ones, are rare, and you guys were the best.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you so much. We sure enjoyed working with and for you, Scott. So much.
Sure did. It was a pleasure.
Well, it was great. Now, we're going to give the audience a little taste of that. We have a comedy set from back in 1980 coming up. So, Mack, Jamie, thanks so much. Ladies and gentlemen, the podcast audience, sit back and enjoy some of the best stand-up comedy by a comedy team ever. Thanks, guys. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Scott. I look forward to listening to what we did.
Ladies and gentlemen, sit back and enjoy the comedy of Mack and Jamie.
Shall we? Let's see. What kind of age range we have?
Yeah.
For example, let's see. Anybody remember when bawling all night meant crying your eyes out? For example.
Remember when getting stoned left you dead or badly bruised, perhaps? You remember when Rocky was just a flying squirrel? Does anybody remember that thing? Remember when sushi was bait?
Anybody remember when Americans bought American cars? You remember that? American televisions and radios? Back when you could actually pronounce the name of your camera?
Well,
Remember?
this is our tribute to those days gone by.
Hana Sanyo, Mazda Naikana Kai, Mitsubishi, Tatsuya Shika Sony, Yamaha, Toshiba, Suzuki, Kawasaki, Toyota, Ikigami, Hitachi, Honda, Subaru.
Yeah. Hey. Thanks. Well, this is great.
I brought along something very special tonight. A little surprise for you, Matt. This is the little golden book my mother read to me when I was growing up, and we'd like to do something out of it for you right now.
Yeah, but this is not appropriate.
It's perfect. They're going to love it. They're drunk. We're tripping. Who cares?
Once upon a time, in a land far away, there was a wandering minstrel who journeyed merrily through the kingdom, dancing over hill and dale, skipping gaily along the back roads, getting laid. The women you wouldn't believe. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, he strolled happily through the forest, sharing his sprightly music with the birds of the wood,
And playing for all the woodland creatures while he laughed gleefully.
Soon the minstrel stopped at a babbling brook, and he heard the soft murmurings of a friendly frog. In a near...
It's a frog.
An exploding frog, apparently. In a nearby meadow, a herd of cows passed by. As a dog barked in the distance. What? Come on, how many cows?
Just some stragglers. They're a little late.
As a dog barked in the distance, and the minstrel raised his eyes to see a flock of ducks winging by overhead. Suddenly,
I believe I dropped that sucker. Right out of the sky.
Suddenly, he heard a snorting sound. No. Wild pigs. And a dog trotted by, yapping at the ducks and the cows, grazing silently. In the same pasture with a flock of sheep. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a unicorn appeared. He stood grandly in the sunlight, excited and proud. Suddenly, the minstrel spotted the Queen Mary just offshore, being followed by a submarine that was under attack, but a tornado was spotted heading for the town. Several parties on Yamaha dirt bikes riding in helicopters used sirens to clear the streets. Aunt B showed up. A woman screamed. The gun went off. The baby cried. George Burns appeared.
I'd like to sing a little song for you.
Some open champagne for the arrival of Walter Brennan.
Done. Here she's having
And a herd of elephants. Being followed by Marlon Perkins.
Here's Jim kissing an anteater. Go ahead, Jim. Suck a little face with that anteater for it. Mutual's got you covered.
And the minstrel said goodbye to the birds and the sheep and Aunt B and the ducks and the helicopter and seagulls and the gorillas and the chants. And he skipped merrily away, playing his happy music as the sun began to set on the beautiful kingdom.
One of the best comedy teams in the history of stand-up comedy. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the comedy set of Mack and Jamie. I know you enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoyed the interview. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another great show. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.